Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to break down the exact neurobiology of why telling someone to relax is, well, it's absolutely the worst thing you can do during an interpersonal conflict. I am so excited to guide you through this today, because the truth is, communication usually doesn't break down because we lack mutual goodwill. It actually breaks down because there's this profound mismatch between human neurobiology and the verbal responses we lean on the most.
So let's just dive right in and ask ourselves a highly relatable question. Think back on your own life. Has telling someone to calm down literally ever worked? Because if we're being completely honest about our past interactions, we all know the answer is a resounding no. It's usually intended to just restore order, right? But instead, it almost universally triggers this sudden, super intense defensive reaction. And today, we're going to figure out exactly why that happens.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap. We're covering why calm down backfires, the brain's dual highway, the anatomy of an emotional hijack, the SCARF model, real-world conflict scenarios, and we'll wrap up with some awesome, science-backed de-escalation tools. All right, let's jump straight into part one, why calm down backfires. Here's the fascinating thing. Commanding calmness is actually perceived by the brain as a social threat. You see, when someone is frustrated, their nervous system is already stuck in a defensive state, so any perceived demand is instantly processed as a threat. We call this the pushback phenomenon. It literally causes people to instinctively push back even harder just to protect their own autonomy. Plus, it acts as major psychological invalidation. It essentially tells the person, hey, you're acting crazy, entirely dismissing the real root of their distress. It sets up this transactional power dynamic where the speaker assumes this position of cool, rational superiority, and yeah, that immediately triggers defensiveness. Moving right along to part two, the brain's dual highway.
To really understand this, we have to look under the hood at how our brain processes things, a concept mapped out by the pioneering neuroscientist Joseph LeDoux. It all starts in the thalamus. Every raised voice, every tense facial expression, or even a highly critical email, it hits this part of the brain first. Think of the thalamus as the brain's ultimate air traffic controller. Once the sensory data arrives, the thalamus routes it along two very different neural highways at the exact same time.
And you've got to notice the incredible speed discrepancy between these two routes. First, we have the low road. This is an extremely rapid shortcut that projects directly to the amygdala, which is basically the brain's internal security guard. It operates in just 12 milliseconds. That is mind-blowingly fast. It reacts to subliminal threats and launches a physical defense before your conscious mind is even aware of what's happening. On the other hand, we have the high road. This sends information up to the prefrontal cortex, your logical executive. It analyzes the danger with a lot of nuance, but it's slow. So by the time your logical brain actually finishes its analysis, that rapid low road has already completely hijacked your system. Which perfectly brings us to part three, the anatomy of an emotional hijack. This physiological lockout is what Daniel Goleman famously termed the amygdala hijack. And the absolutely crucial point here is that this is not a failure of willpower. It's not a character flaw. Your sympathetic nervous system just slams its foot on the accelerator. The amygdala triggers the release of cortisol and adrenaline, and boom, your heart rate spikes way past 100 beats per minute. Your body is urgently prepping for physical action, which totally overrides slow, deliberate thought. During this intense physiological cascade, blood and oxygen are literally stolen from your thinking brain and redirected out to your limbs. This cognitive lockout completely strips a person of their empathy and their problem-solving capacity. Working memory just plummets. The brain becomes temporarily incapable of seeing multiple solutions, and it basically defaults to a highly rigid, super defensive us versus them perspective.
And the timeline of all this reveals exactly why it's biologically impossible to just snap out of it. Long after that initial 12-millisecond trigger from the thalamus, those stress hormones are running the show. Adrenaline keeps the brain highly reactive for a solid 18 minutes, and honestly, it takes 3 to 4 hours for the secondary stress hormones to fully clear out of the system. For hours, the body remains a primed powder keg.
Okay, part 4, the SCARF model explained.
Let's shift from biology to psychology with Dr. David Rock's SCARF model.
This perfectly explains why telling someone to relax is processed as actual physical danger. The model shows our brains process social threats using the exact same neural networks as physical ones. So calm down is a multidimensional attack. It threatens their status by implying they're being hysterical. It threatens autonomy by dictating an emotional command. It destroys relatedness by framing you as a hostile critic instead of a partner. And it violates fairness by totally ignoring whatever injustice made them upset in the first place. Knowing this, we absolutely have to reframe our words to validate them, offer choices, and clearly establish non-aggression.
Part 5. Real-world conflict scenarios.
So what does this actually look like in our day-to-day lives? Well, whether you're sitting in a really tense performance review at work, dealing with a screaming retail customer, or facing what relationship expert Dr. John Gottman calls a flooded spouse, the exact same physiological lockout is happening. In all these environments, a hijacked individual literally cannot process the meaning of your words. They're only scanning for threat cues. If a manager tells an upset employee to calm down, boom, they've just turned a basic operational issue into a bitter personal conflict. In sales, it draws an invisible, completely unnecessary battle line.
And in romantic relationships, if your partner hits that state of diffuse physiological arousal or flooding, the only effective solution is a structured physical break. You need at least 20 to 30 minutes away from each other. And during that time, you can't just sit there ruminating on the argument. You literally have to step away and let the nervous system physically clear those stress hormones. Otherwise, that flooding loop is just going to keep intensifying.
And finally, Part 6. Science-backed de-escalation tools. Because the thinking brain is fully offline during a hijack, heavy, logic-based interventions just won't work. We have to use somatic, or physical interventions to signal safety directly to the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the body's biological brake pedal. You can use temperature shifting, like running cold water over your wrists to stimulate the vagus nerve, or try box breathing. It's super simple. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold for 4. This pattern actually forces oxygen back into the prefrontal cortex and physically breaks the stress response. Another incredibly powerful tool is affect labeling. Dr. Matthew Lieberman's fMRI research at UCLA is so cool here. He proved that simply putting complex feelings into precise words recruits the prefrontal cortex to directly calm the limbic system. They call it name it to tame it. Doing this literally reduces amygdala activity by 30 to 50%. Building that emotional vocabulary is an absolute game changer for regulation.
So what do we actually say? We need to replace those obsolete, condescending commands with strategic, collaborative alternatives. This is basically your literal script to guide a brain away from anger. Instead of calm down, which spikes social pressure, try, let's step over here. It repositions them and removes the audience. Instead of stop overreacting, ask, help me understand what happened. That pulls their logical brain right back online. And instead of, you're being unreasonable, just try, if I were in your shoes, I think I'd feel the same way. That demonstrates instant empathy and rebuilds that sense of relatedness.
I'll leave you with this final thought today. Understanding the deep mechanics of the thalamus and the amygdala gives you the extraordinary power to diffuse a situation rather than accidentally detonating it. So, knowing what you now know about the low road, the physiological lockout, and the scarf model, next time an emotional hijack strikes, will you try to command control or will you co-regulate?